Hypatia was an influential Egyptian mathematician, astronomer, and Neoplatonist philosopher in 5th century Alexandria, who met a horrible end. She taught and constructed scientific instruments such as the astrolabe and hydrometer, and wrote important commentaries on works like Euclid's Elements and Diophantus's Arithmetica, which shaped geometry and mathematics for centuries. However, she was also a political figure, close to Orestes, the Roman prefect, who was in conflict with Bishop Cyril of Alexandria. This was her demise. In March 515 AD, a fanatical Christian mob attacked her carriage while traveling home. They dragged her into a church, stripped her naked, and murdered her by beating and cutting her with sharp pottery shards. The mob then removed her eyes, tore her apart, and burned the remains. Empedocles was a Greek philosopher who introduced the idea that everything is made of 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water, a theory that shaped Western science for 2000 years and was later adopted by Aristotle. He also proposed that light travels over time rather than instantly, and was widely respected as a healer, poet, and politician. But at around 430 BC, he had a not-so-brilliant idea. According to legend, he jumped into Sicily's Mount Etna volcano to prove he was immortal, or had become a god. Legend says the volcano later spat back one of his bronze sandals, revealing what really happened. Confucius was a Chinese philosopher and one of the most influential thinkers in history. His teachings on ethics, social harmony, respect for family, and proper conduct shaped education, government, and society across East Asia, later becoming the official ideology of the Han Dynasty and beyond. In his final years, he focused on teaching his 3,000 students. After losing his son and his favorite disciples, and feeling his ideas had not fully taken hold, he died around 479 BC, aged 71, from natural causes. His burial site became a large cemetery covering roughly the size of 350 football fields. Heraclitus was a Greek philosopher known for the idea of constant change or flux, meaning you cannot step into the same river twice. He also introduced the concept of the logos, the unchanging objective truth that governs that change. His ideas influenced Plato, Aristotle, the Stoics, and later Hegel and Nietzsche. But he eventually developed dropsy, severe swelling linked to his strict vegetable diet. He asked doctors for help but spoke in riddles to them. When they couldn't understand his problem, he tried to treat himself by covering his body in cow dung and lying in the sun, believing the heat would draw out the moisture. But the pile hardened around him so he couldn't move, and he eventually suffocated around 475 BC. Some accounts claimed wild dogs later ate his body. Chrysippus was a Greek philosopher often called the second founder of Stoicism. He wrote over 700 works in the field, taught emotional self-control, and even critics later said his work was essential to the development of their own ideas. However, around 206 BC, at about age 73, he apparently saw a donkey eating his fermented figs and found it so funny that he told a servant to give the donkey undiluted wine to wash them down. Seeing this caused him to break into such intense, uncontrollable laughter that his body shut down from the lack of oxygen, and he died shortly thereafter, either from cardiac arrest or asphyxiation. Siddhartha Gautama, known as the Buddha, was a major spiritual teacher from Nepal. He left his life as a wealthy prince to become an ascetic and founded Buddhism. His teachings on compassion, ethical living, mindfulness, and the middle way, avoiding both indulgence and extreme asceticism, spread for over 2,500 years. He died around age 80 in India between 483 and 400 BC. According to tradition, he became ill after eating a spoiled pork or mushroom dish offered by a blacksmith. As he lay dying, he thanked the host for the meal and continued teaching, stressing that all things are temporary and urging his followers to seek liberation through effort. Some accounts say he died from dysentery, an inflammatory intestinal infection. Others say he succumbed to pig bell, a severe necrotizing infection of the small intestine. Socrates was one of the most influential figures in Western philosophy, shifting its focus from natural science to ethics, virtue, and human life. He developed the Socratic method of critical inquiry, mentored Plato, and shaped centuries of thought. However, his relentless questioning made him dangerous to Athens' authorities. Eventually, he was charged by a male Athenian court with impiety, worshipping false gods and corrupting the youth. But during his trial, he suggested he deserved free meals for his contributions in Athens. In 399 BC, aged 71, he was sentenced to death after refusing to stop teaching. He spent his final day in prison, declining an offer to escape from his friends. He was then forced to drink a poison made from hemlock, but he stayed calm. It paralyzed him from the feet upward until it reached his heart and lungs. According to Plato, his last words were a reminder to repay a small debt. We owe a cock to Asclepius. Plato was an ancient Greek who laid the foundation for Western philosophy, science, and politics. His theory of forms argues that perfect, unchanging concepts exist beyond the physical world, while the things we see are only imperfect copies of them. After years of travel, he spent his final years in Athens writing. He died around 348 BC at about 80. Most accounts say he passed peacefully of old age or illness in his sleep. Some stories claim he died at a wedding feast, others that he succumbed to a fever while deliriously criticizing a Thracian flute girl's poor sense of rhythm. Aristotle was a student of Plato and one of the most impactful thinkers in history. His work covered metaphysics, ethics, politics, biology, and physics, shaping Western philosophy and science. He also developed formal logic and early systems of classification. After the death of Alexander the Great, anti-Macedonian sentiment in Athens led to him being accused of impiety. To avoid a fate like Socrates, he fled the city, saying he would not allow Athens to sin twice against philosophy, and moved to his mother's estate on the island of Euboea. He died there in 322 BC, aged 62, from a long-term digestive illness. Augustine of Hippo was a Christian theologian and philosopher from Roman North Africa, present-day Algeria, often ranked as the single most important thinker of the Middle Ages. His ideas on original sin, grace, free will, time, and memory shaped Christianity and Western thought. But in 430 AD, during the Vandal siege of Hippo, he fell ill with a fever. As he was dying, he had the Psalms of David written and hung on his walls, and spent his final days praying and weeping in repentance. He died on August 28, 430 AD, aged 75. Soon after, the Vandals lifted the siege, but later returned and burned the city, sparing only his cathedral and library. Thomas Aquinas was an Italian priest considered one of the most influential thinkers in Catholic theology and Western philosophy. He combined Aristotle's ideas with Christian belief and is famous for his 5 ways arguments for God's existence and virtue ethics. In 1274, he was traveling on a donkey to speak at the Second Council of Lyon, but while riding he struck his head hard on an overhanging branch. The impact caused a slow accumulation of blood between the brain and skull, leading to severe headaches, confusion, and weakness. His condition worsened over several weeks, despite care from monks in a monastery, and he died on March 7, 1274 at age 48 from the effects of the head injury while commenting on a poem. Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, was a Persian philosopher and physician who worked in Iranian royal courts and became one of the most influential figures in both Islamic and European thought. Often called the father of early modern medicine, he is best known for his encyclopedias, the Book of Healing and the Canon of Medicine. He suffered from recurrent colic throughout his life, but he continued working until his death. In 1037, while accompanying a prince on campaign, a painful attack struck. Despite his expertise, he treated himself aggressively, including 8 self-administered enemas in a single day. This caused serious intestinal damage. Some accounts say a servant later added excess opium to his medicine, either accidentally or intentionally. He died on June 22, 1037, aged 57 in Hamadan. Francis Bacon was an English philosopher known as the father of empiricism, arguing that knowledge should come from observation and experimentation rather than ancient logic. His ideas helped shape the scientific revolution and modern research. In April 1626, while traveling through snow near Highgate outside London, he decided to test whether meat could be preserved with snow. He bought a hen and stuffed snow into it, but the cold exposure made him seriously ill. Unable to return home, he was taken to a country house of his friend, where he was placed in a damp bed, which made things worse. He died on April 9th, 1626, aged 65 from pneumonia, essentially killed by his own scientific curiosity. René Descartes was a Frenchman known as the father of modern philosophy. He rejected reliance on past philosophers, promoted rationalism, introduced coordinate geometry, and helped shape the scientific revolution. His famous idea, "I think, therefore I am," and his view separating mind and body influenced philosophy and psychology for centuries. In 1649, he moved to Sweden at the invitation of Queen Christina to teach her, but she demanded lessons at 5 a.m. in a cold, drafty castle. He fell ill on February 1st, 1650, and after about 10 days died on February 11th, aged 53, likely from pneumonia. An alternative theory claims he was poisoned for his heretic views by a priest using an arsenic-laced communion wafer to prevent him from influencing the queen. Kurt Gödel was an Austro-Hungarian logician, considered one of the most important alongside Aristotle. His 1931 incompleteness theorems revolutionized mathematics plus philosophy and created profound implications for artificial intelligence. In later life, he suffered from mental instability. After one of his friends was murdered, he developed paranoia of being poisoned. He would only eat food prepared by his wife, but when she was hospitalized for 6 months, he refused to eat at all. When he died on February 14th, 1978, in Princeton Hospital, New Jersey, he weighed 29 kilograms. He was 71. Karl Marx was a German philosopher whose ideas formed the basis of communism and influenced the creation of states like the USSR and China. His critique of capitalism, especially the Communist Manifesto, shaped socialist thought worldwide. After his wife's death in 1881, he caught chronic airway inflammation, which led to bronchitis and lung inflammation. He was struggling to breathe and had sharp, stabbing chest pain constantly. He died in London on March 14, 1883 at age 64, poor and stateless. Friedrich Nietzsche was a German philosopher known for the idea that God is dead, using it to describe the decline of traditional Christian values. He introduced concepts like the Übermensch, the will to power, and emphasized individual meaning and responsibility. He also criticized Western morality, arguing it limited human potential. In 1889, at age 44, he had a mental breakdown, reportedly after witnessing a horse being beaten in Turin, Italy, after which he threw his arms around its neck to protect it and then collapsed. In the following days, he wrote bizarre letters to his friends claiming he had created the world, ordering the Pope to be jailed, and demanding that the German Emperor and all anti-Semites be shot. He lived the next 11 years in a state of paralysis and dementia under family care. He died on August 25, 1900, at age 55 from pneumonia and a stroke. John Locke was an Englishman known as the father of liberalism. His ideas on liberty, property, and the legitimacy of the authority of the state over the individual shaped modern democracy and influenced the American Revolution and the Declaration of Independence. He also argued that people have the right to remove unjust rulers. In his final years, Locke lived quietly as a guest at his friend's manor in the countryside, where the cleaner air helped with his chronic asthma. However, the attacks grew more severe. On October 28, 1704, at age 72, he died peacefully in his room. David Hume was a Scottish philosopher whose empiricist and skeptical approach shaped modern thought, influencing Immanuel Kant, Adam Smith, and Charles Darwin. He died in Edinburgh at age 65 from abdominal cancer, calmly saying that belief in an afterlife was unreasonable. Jean-Jacques Rousseau was a Swiss philosopher who argued that humans are naturally good, but corrupted by society. He claimed that legitimate government comes from the general will of the people, influencing democratic ideas and the French Revolution. He also promoted education that develops a child's natural abilities and emphasized emotion and authenticity. But many didn't like his views, so he had to live as a fugitive much of his life. In 1776, he was knocked down by a nobleman's carriage and Great Dane dog in Paris, causing a concussion and later neurological damage and seizures. His health declined afterward. In 1778, he moved to a cottage in the castle of one of his students. On July 1st, he had a big meal with his host's family, but the next morning, as he was about to go teach music, he suddenly died from a brain hemorrhage caused by a stroke. He was 66. Immanuel Kant was a German philosopher who created a new era in philosophy. His moral theory, the categorical imperative, argued that people should only act in ways they would want everyone else to follow. He also shaped modern ethics, metaphysics, and political thought. In his Critique of Pure Reason, he argued that we don't see reality as it truly is, only how our minds interpret it. In his final years, speech problems and dementia started to affect his health. He became weak, suffered falls, and lost his appetite. He died on February 12, 1804 in Königsberg, aged 79, saying, "Es ist gut." Ludwig Wittgenstein was an Austrian philosopher known for transforming how philosophy understands language, meaning, and logic, with lasting impact on psychology and social theory. By 1949, during a trip to Ithaca, New York, he was already unwell with anemia. He was later diagnosed with inoperable prostate cancer that had spread. Knowing he had little time left, he continued writing and working until the very end. He spent his final days at his doctor's home in Cambridge, refusing a hospital. On April 28, 1951, at the age of 62, he became critically ill and died shortly after telling his doctor's wife, "Tell them I've had a wonderful life."